So, hey everyone, I'm Nick. I'm one of the founders of Feed, which is a new automated digital ad platform that we built for musicians and their teams to help them find new audiences, to keep their whole following engaged, and ultimately grow income from things like tickets and records. I co-founded Feed with a guy called Joshua Jacobson, and today I'm going to talk through a few thoughts on marketing options for independent musicians, the pros and cons of each. We've got some slides that you can see too, and I'll go into various things like the different options available to you, your marketing funnel, how Feed works, what content we see working best, and the general approach you can take as an independent musician to think of yourself as a creative business rather than just someone who makes music. It's a sort of more holistic thing than that. Just as a bit of an introduction to us, we both have backgrounds in the music industry. So my co-founder Joshua headed up digital at independent record labels in the UK. He was at Transgressive, and before that he was at Warp. And he's got lots of experience running digital marketing campaigns for artists. I was a musician. I went into the finance world to become an investor for a bit, and got back into music in the management side and co-founded Feed with Josh a couple of years ago. And we're building Feed for entrepreneurial artists and their teams. So our background is very much music and digital, and I guess we saw that there weren't many tools that really help 95% of musicians. So people who have small budgets, who maybe don't know anything about marketing and probably don't have a whole lot of time either. So we'll talk about that more in a sec, but first I think we want to go through the marketing options available to you as an independent artist, pros and cons of each as we see them. So the first one I'm sure you know about, PR and press, obviously incredibly well known. Everyone knows roughly how it works. I guess starting with the cons, it's quite hard to measure the effectiveness of getting a blog article written about you, or a sort of review in a music magazine, because it's hard to measure exactly what the reach is from those magazines. How big is the readership of the readership? How many are paying attention on that day? How many actually click through to your profile? It's quite tricky actually. You can attempt to measure this by giving the blog a specific link that you can track numbers of people going through it. And we've done this a couple of times, and the numbers end up being quite small. It's also slightly out of your control as well. You can't control what your PR person is doing. You can't control which blogs, which magazines are going to pick it up and like your music. And the last con, I suppose, is that it's high upfront costs. So, anywhere from £500 to £1,500 typically if you're starting out. That's a lot of money to spend, probably the whole budget for your first single, for example, to spend on something that's so inherently uncertain, especially uncertain when you're starting out. So we view PR and press as maybe more important, down the line, when it is part of a wider campaign and outsourcing is more useful. But for an independent artist starting out, unless you've got lots and lots of cash, it seems maybe not the best thing to do straight out. If we talk about agencies, also if you're one of the smaller clients, it's going to be difficult for you to get any traction with them in a way. You're probably going to be at the bottom of a long list of clients. Radio plugging, number two, is a similar story, to be honest. High upfront costs, difficult to control, very hard to measure the actual effectiveness. So for example, you get a radio play on BBC Introducing in the UK. How many people are actually listening at midnight when your track is played? And of those, how many people take the time to search you or Shazam the track? It's very difficult. The radio station might have a listenership, but in terms of the actual number of people that translates into listening to your music or following you on social media, it can be a very high drop-off. Digital and social sort of overlap somewhat with PR and press because you obviously have digital agencies. Same comments, I guess, apply to digital agencies as they do for PR and press. Now there is obviously self-serve digital, which is sort of a no-brainer for artists starting out. It's much more controllable, it's auditable, the reach is quite impressive. You can start out organically and then throw in some ad spend, but it's a much more controlled, measurable impact. And you can work with really small budgets as well on the paid side. Number 4, self-pitching. We've seen some quite good results with some platforms like SubmitHub and Muso Soup. Obviously Spotify for Artists, you can pitch your own music. Again, it's pitching, so it's uncertain as to what the results are going to be, but it's available to you. You can do it yourself. Generally doesn't cost much, if anything. So definitely worth being part of your campaign as an independent artist for sure, whatever stage you're at. Record label, obviously, tiny number of artists are actually signed to labels. Those, you've got to be quite careful, I think, about the kind of label you work with. What are they going to offer you? Is it financial? Are they going to take rights? Are they going to pitch your music? Being quite specific about what they're actually going to do to you is important. But that aside, obviously, getting a record deal in the first place is incredibly difficult, somewhat out of your control, and tends to happen, when you've spent a bit of time developing as an artist. So generally that comes a little bit later. And when you're starting out and building your career, ideally you want to get to the point where labels are coming to you and you can make the decision. You have the power at that point to either go with a label or continue independently and build a team around you. So setting up your marketing funnel, sort of the first thing you can do when it comes to marketing is thinking about and planning out your marketing funnel. We'll give you links to our blog where we write a lot about this in detail, but I'll cover the kind of basic concepts here. It's used, businesses, startups, whatever it is, fashion brands. Even if you're starting up as a fashion brand on Instagram, the concept of marketing funnel is used the whole time, and it applies just as much to music as it does to any other industry. So at the top of the funnel, it's all about discovery. You've got cold audiences, people who haven't heard about you before. It's all about awareness at this point, getting them to engage, so you can retarget them. So you're trying to reach a lot of people quite cheaply and getting them to engage, and obviously targeting comes into it here. Are you running ads to the right kind of audiences? Are you pitching the right magazines, music blogs through SubmitHub? You want to find people who are likely to engage with what you're doing. Once they engage, you can retarget, and we fall down into the sort of next part of the funnel, which is the warm part. So what we're trying to do here is, once someone's engaged with you, you can retarget them. And these are people who've heard about you at least once. They might not know exactly what you're about, but there's some level of familiarity there. There's the rule of 4, which is often talked about, which is on average, someone needs to see 4 bits of content from you before they make the decision whether to follow you or not. And the best way to do that is through retargeting. Essentially what you're doing is continuing a conversation with those people who've seen an ad or read about you briefly, or maybe even seen you play at a gig. Once they've had that initial point of contact, building the relationship with them, telling them more about what you're up to, and hopefully, if they like what they see and they like what they hear, they'll follow you, they'll listen to your music, and ultimately, when we get to the bottom of the funnel, they will buy tickets and they will actually become revenue generating for you. So the hot part of the funnel is where we're thinking about conversions. When I say conversions, it could be a number of different things, but repeat listeners on Spotify, traditionally conversion would be some sort of purchase. So buying a record or maybe downloading something on Bandcamp, buying tickets to your gigs. Here you can start getting an actual monetary return on all the investment you've made in the cold and warm part of the funnel. So this is very kind of standard marketing theory, but a lot of musicians don't think about things in this way, even though it could be really helpful. So really using the funnel to engage people at the top, move them down into a point where they are converting and they are signing up to a mailing list, could be another conversion, is really important. For example, if you try and get someone to buy, if we're taking the other approach, trying to get someone to buy your record before they've even heard any of your music is going to be quite difficult. So what we want to do is gradually warm them up to what you're doing, build a relationship, and then ask them to buy the record. And the sort of even below hot is you've got super fans, people who are actually talking about you, spreading the word to their friends, repeat conversions, maybe they subscribe to you on Patreon, which is a really interesting one, I think, for musicians. In Feed, we are automating this marketing funnel basically for musicians. Is how it works. You sign up, you set a budget, and it will automate these different stages. We've done the cold part, we've done the warm part, so it's good at generating interest, building relationships with your fans, and generating follows and traffic to Spotify, your website, wherever you might want to send people. And we're currently working on the conversions part of the funnel, which is, as a reminder, it's sending people to your website or to Bandcamp to buy products or buy tickets, get that monetary return. In terms of the content that we see working best, obviously we see a lot of ad results, we see a lot of organic posts from various artists, and just wanted to pick out 3 key themes here. First of all, that salesy ads, when I say salesy ads, I mean ads that look like marketing, perform 50% worse than natural feeling ads. Feed creates ads that look exactly like your posts because content that's in your own voice, it feels natural, it feels quite organic, tends to perform much better. People react much better to that, at least on, where we can measure it on social media. So anytime something's too salesy and, it's like stream my album, which is out now, those ads tend to perform much worse because you're directly asking people to do something potentially, too soon. This is what we've always believed, and our data is now showing. The good news is it means you don't have to create all this other type of content. You can use the content that's already there for your ads, because actually it performs much better than the really high production value video that you've been working on that you think is going to perform really well as an ad. The second point, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but posts with you in them perform much better than those without. A huge 141% better. It's not to say that you need to be in selfies and talking to camera. That's not what I mean by posts with you in them. But it could be footage of you making music in the studio, behind the scenes, playing a gig, whatever it is. But posts where the musician or the group are actually in them do perform much better, and it's sort of I guess straightforward as to why that is. People are not just interested in music, but your fans are also interested in you. Social media is inherently social, and so obviously they're going to be really interested in getting that insight into you as a musician and your life generally. And the last one, another one that I'm sure you've heard, but we found videos outperform images by 65%, tend to be much more engaging. That's not to say that images can't do really well and really resonate with people, but generally speaking, videos outperform. So talking about investing in yourself, I think this is a really important one. Thinking about yourself as a creative entrepreneur, where your product is your music or your art. I say it's a marathon, not a sprint. Essentially, taking a long-term view is really advantageous. When you're a startup like we are at Feed, you invest now for benefits down the line. And I think that's exactly what you're doing as a musician with your marketing funnel. When you're first starting out, you're trying to reach lots of people. You're spending the budget available to you to build up that audience and invest, because that audience, although they might not buy tickets straight away today, as you're building those relationships in a few years' time, those people are gonna provide you the return at the bottom of the funnel. So what I mean by that is those people who you're reaching for the first time today, if you're doing things well and things are going right, they're gonna be the people who are supporting you tomorrow. We get lots of people focused on Instagram and Spotify because they're very visible stats. That's fine, you know, same Instagram followers, Spotify followers, obviously that's a kind of good indication that if you're investing and people are following, that you are growing that audience. But the bottom of the funnel is where you make income today. And that's really where you need to think about converting people. Ultimately, we assume that everyone wants to make a living from their music, or at least make some money out of it. And you know, we sort of practice what we preach at Feed. We're not making money now, really. We're only 1 year into a 5-year plan, but we're investing for the future in anticipation of being a bigger business that helps a huge number of artists. And it's a job that can pay both of us as founders. Budgeting, we built Feed with the kind of theory that little and often is the way to go. So rather than blowing the whole budget in a couple of weeks around a release, drip feeding a small amount in over a sustainable amount over a longer period, we see tends to work much better. We've got a article about setting a music marketing budget, which is one of the most popular articles on our blog, where we go through, you know, what a typical budget for a single, an EP, and an album might look like. Broadly speaking, on each one we have a rule of thumb, which is the cost it takes to make the music should roughly equal the cost of marketing, and we have some suggestions on what you can spend and how you can spend effectively even with small budgets. You know, ultimately it's what you can afford, but even a small amount of budget can go a long way if you're spending it in the right way. So I'll put a link to that, hopefully put a link to that article in the presentation or in our bio. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Appreciate the time you've taken to listen. It was really short. I know each one of these slides could be an hour-long talk in and of itself. There's a few links I've included at the end of the deck that you might find useful, including to our blog where we talk more about all of these sorts of issues, and you can sign up there if you want to stay in the loop and hear the latest from us when we release a new article. Also, for everyone who's attending Live at Heart South East or who's part of the festival, there's a link where you can sign up to the beta version of Feed, skip the waiting list if you want to check it out or give it a go. I'm still in touch directly with everyone who signs up, and we'll see you've come from the conference, so we will get in touch once you've signed up and chat through what you want to use the platform for, and yeah, hopefully get you started. So we'd love to have more of you on board, and yeah, really appreciate the time. Thanks for listening, and all the best.